Are there any constituent statements by honourable members? And I call the member for Kingsford Smith.
Thanks, Speaker. The 1st of December each year is, of course, the first day of summer. It's also National Water Safety Day, and there's a clear connection between the two. Sadly, summer is the peak season when most drownings occur in Australia. We already lost too many Australians to drowning over the past 12 months, and these are often deaths that can be prevented. And while one drowning is still one too many, we must face up to the reality that it's been a particularly bad year with 339 deaths, according to the latest National Drowning Report. So as the weather warms up, more of us will be heading to the beaches, rivers and pools to cool off. But we should be celebrating the start of summer, not preparing for more sadness. And I join with the co-chair of the Parliamentary Friends of Surf Life Saving, the member for Moncrieff, in encouraging all Australians to remember the importance of staying safe and acting responsibly around water across our nation over the summer. Accidents in the water can be avoided if we act responsibly and follow basic water safety rules. Always swim between the red and yellow flags at the beach and obey the instructions of lifesavers. Always supervise children in and around the water at all times. Avoid alcohol and drugs while undertaking water activities. Wear a life jacket if you're going boating, rock fishing or on a watercraft. And if you get stuck in a rip at the beach, don't panic, float and put your hand up and hopefully someone will come and save you. Our leading water safety authorities, including Surf Life Saving Australia and Royal Life Saving, play an important role in helping to keep Australians safe in and around the water. The dedicated efforts of these organisations, including the lifeguards and lifesavers, as well as over 45,000 volunteers, contribute more than 1.3 million hours each year to make a vital and greatly valued contribution to our nation. Last season alone, Surf Life Savers and lifeguards performed thousands of rescues and undertook more than 1 million preventative actions. I want to also acknowledge the importance of swimming lessons. Unfortunately, over the COVID period, we've seen a reduction in the number of kids undertaking swimming lessons. And this is something that we heard from SwimSafe Ambassador Gian Rooney this week, who's been calling for swimming lessons for 6 months through to 12-year-olds. These are skills for life. These are skills that can save lives. And I think that governments at all levels need to be doing more to ensure that a kid that graduates from Year 6 has gone through swimming lessons to ensure that they have basic competence in and around the water. Let's celebrate this summer and enjoy the great outdoors by being safe around the water.
I call the member for Banks.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, Peakhurst West Swimming Pool was built by the community and it needs to be maintained for the community. The Peakhurst Amateur Swimming Co-op swims there, the Penshurst RSL Swim Club, many community-led groups such as the one run by Roy Cho, and Peakhurst West Swimming Pool must be preserved. With the departure of Bluefit from the pool, it is very important that the state government steps in and provides funding to ensure the continued operation of Peakhurst West Swimming Pool, which is a critical part of our community. Deputy Speaker, St George Australian Football Club is one of the great institutions of our area, and just recently I attended their annual dinner, and it was great to see Angie Zissis, Brendan Donoghue and all of the executive and players of the club. The club's gone from strength to strength in recent years and now has a very strong and active female division within the club with lots of female players, which is a wonderful thing to see. The event was held at Beverley Park and it was really well attended and celebrating this terrific organisation which has been around in our community for about 60 years. So to Angie, to Brendan, to everyone who's involved in St George AFC, congratulations on another great year, and it was great to hear about the successes during the season. Deputy Speaker, Pastor Noah Ho at Riverwood Baptist Church leads a large and a very important congregation in our community. Recently, the church has undergone a quite extensive series of renovations with new meeting rooms added and a great outdoor area for the community to gather. And it was wonderful to visit Noah and to see the renovations recently. Thank you to Riverwood Baptist Church for everything you do for our community and for the important role that you play within it. Deputy Speaker, for many years, Happy Singing Group at Hurstville has been bringing goodwill to our community through the efforts of its singers. Really high quality singers from lots of different genres of music at Happy Singing Group. And I want to thank David Guo, Karen as well from Happy Singing Group, and everyone who's been involved in this organisation over the years. COVID was a difficult time for all singing groups around the country, Deputy Speaker, and certainly that was the case in our community. But Happy Singing Group is doing a wonderful job bringing people together and celebrating the joy and the majesty of music.
Are there any statements by members and honourable members? And I call the member for Jagga Jagga.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, this week marks 6 months since the Australian people voted in a new government. And they voted the Albanese Labor government into office because they wanted a better future. They wanted a government that would do the work, a government that took a grown-up approach to the challenges our country is facing. And that's what our government is doing. We have not wasted a moment of the past 6 months in getting on with some of the big and difficult things that my community and communities across this country need. And I'm going to mark a few of those really big things we've done. The cheaper childcare legislation, which was passed by this parliament yesterday. This will make a huge difference to the lives of 6,600 families in my community. And I know that there were many families across my community who have been struggling with the cost of childcare. In fact, I got an email from one member of my community just yesterday saying how much she loves living in our area, how important it is to her that she's bringing her children up here. But that between the cost of childcare and interest rates, she's finding it really hard to get ahead. And I know that that's not an isolated instance. I know that for many, particularly women in our community, they look at the cost of childcare and they think, well, is it worth it? Am I going to earn more than I'm spending? And what our government is doing is we are changing that equation for local families. From mid-next year, these changes will make childcare more affordable by lifting the subsidies for families. This is a win for children in our community, it's a win for parents in our community, and it's a win for our economy. This week, our government is focusing on the National Anti-Corruption Commission. And this is something we committed to the Australian people that we would get done, and we are doing it. And it is so important that Australia finally has a powerful, transparent and independent integrity body that operates in the federal sphere. This was ignored for far too long by the previous government. And it is a very important reform so that people have trust in us in this place and they have trust in our system of government. It's something that I know so many people in Jagga Jagga have spoken to me about that they see as essential, and I know they will be so pleased to know that our government is getting it up and running for next year. Another big change just this week is our government is making electric vehicles cheaper, delivering on the commitment we took to the election to remove the fringe benefits tax on EVs. Again, I've had so many people in my community come up to me and say they want to own an electric vehicle, but the price is just too high for them to justify making that switch. So we're making it easier and cheaper to buy an electric vehicle. Part of the many investments we're putting into renewable energy in this country, to make us a renewable energy superpower, to make sure we're on the right track, and to make sure we're looking at a better future for all of us.
Are there any constituency statements by honourable members? And I call the member for Lindsay.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will take this opportunity now to just do a tiny mini wrap-up of an extraordinary year in my community. I was firstly so proud to be returned as Lindsay's local representative in Australian Parliament. And I know I say it often, but it's my view that I have the best job in the world, and I thank the community of Lindsay for their continued trust in me, and I've also been quite humbled to undertake my new role as the Shadow Assistant Minister for Mental Health and Suicide Prevention, and work hard to ensure that Australians have access to life-saving services. It was an honour earlier in the year to be at the 2022 Penrith Relay for Life at Penrith Paceway and walk with local cancer survivors and families of those who have been lost to this terrible disease, and also members of our community. And a big shout out to all the volunteers for their energy and passion, and their passion to create awareness and also fundraising. In addition to this, Pink Up Penrith, where we raise further funds for the McGrath Foundation, breast care nurses, and taking a bit of a boat trip with the Pendragon of breast women who have survived breast cancer. There's so many wonderful people in my community doing extraordinary work in the volunteer space. Also, in regards to the flooding that has been really hitting my community hard, 4 times some people have lost pretty much everything. So I advocated for stronger support for my community, including being included in those disaster relief payments and raising issues around power outages due to the floods and the mental health impacts, the cumulative mental health impacts these events are having on the same people over and over again. I was honoured to join our community at St Mary's RSL to remember the over 60,000 brave men and women who served in the Vietnam War, and our local St Mary's outpost has a special place in my heart, and we spend as much time as we can there each year supporting our local veterans, and they have become really good friends as well. In September, of course, we watched on and said a final goodbye to our beloved Queen Elizabeth II, 70-year era over, and it was such a moving time. And just last week, planting those Queen's Jubilee trees in our local community and seeing the kids really excited about participating in that is really wonderful. Also, something that kept in my mind is the local Nepean police medals being awarded to some of our most dedicated police officers. And the room was full of truly remarkable achievements and outstanding service and stories of those who have gone above and beyond to keep us safe. And it was wonderful to see so many families, the families that really take the weight of these careers in the police force. So I want to wish my community, if I don't get to stand again, a very Merry Christmas, and I hope you get to enjoy some beautiful time with your families this year. Thank you.
I call the member for Fremantle.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. I'm really delighted today to speak on the 10-year anniversary of Impact 100 Fremantle, an innovative philanthropic endeavour operated by the Fremantle Foundation, sustained by hundreds of generous and engaged donors in my community. Established as a community foundation in 2010 through the leadership and vision of Dylan Smith, the Fremantle Foundation has not only provided critical support to dozens and dozens of grassroots organisations who are themselves vital to social inclusion and wellbeing, it has also helped strengthen the bonds of community through the style and methods of its operation. As part of the Foundation's work, the Impact 100 Fremantle concept was born in 2013. As the name suggests, it seeks to find 100 people who are prepared to donate $1,000 each to create one transformational $100,000 grant for a local charity. And across the spectrum of arts and culture, education, environment, health and wellbeing and family support, for a decade, this grant has been a game changer for its recipients. The community building and deliberative democracy part of Impact 100 is present throughout the process, with donors given the chance to learn about the prospective grant recipients along the way, and then actually determining the successful organisation on a night that includes presentations from each of the shortlisted projects, followed by a vote. This means that the community works together to improve and expand their knowledge in the grant application process, while the proponents take on the challenge of pitching and explaining what they do, receiving feedback along the way. Now, while of course the successful project benefits enormously from the $100,000 grant, there's generally been a smaller but not insignificant grant to the second and third place getters, and on a few occasions projects that have missed out in 1 year go on to succeed in subsequent years. Deputy Speaker, I was fortunate to attend the celebration of Impact 100 Fremantle earlier this month to hear the compelling pitches from each of the 4 shortlisted organisations: Foodbank WA, Circus WA, Waves of Wellness Foundation and the Zonta House Refuge Association. This year's very worthy recipient was Circus WA, which helps thousands of young people to develop their confidence and wellbeing through creative, high-standard training and performance programs. They create pathways for young people of all abilities and backgrounds, thanks to the leadership of their determined and creative ringmaster, Joe Smith. The Impact 100 grant on this occasion will help them grow and develop their youth training program from its current status into a circus academy that delivers skills development and mentorship for young people, including First Nations youth and people with disability. I pay tribute to all of those who have been part of Impact 100 in 2022, noting that it marks 10 fantastic years of the initiative. I acknowledge the good people in the Fremantle Foundation and the excellent people across the Freo community who have given generously over that time, a number of whom have done so many times.
Are there any constituency statements by honourable members? And I call the member for Barker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't know how many times I've stood in this chamber and spoken about the need for additional childcare services in Kingston South East, my electorate. It's got to be a few times, but I'm here again. I wish I wasn't, but I am. So let's recap. This is a community that for over half a century has been crying out for additional childcare places and, with respect, a significant waiting list. They formed a working party in 2019 and called in 2019 to work with me. After deciding the only way to solve the problem was to work with a purpose-built facility, the Coalition pledged $1.8 million for the cause should we win government. To their credit, Labor matched the pledge just before the election on ABC Radio. Then crickets. The community, who has seen children go without childcare grow up, have children of their own, who are also now going without childcare, were made to wait 5 months for reassurance that money was still there. Then we had the newly minted Minister Anne Ali on ABC South East Radio the day following the budget, reassuring the community that there was $1.8 million dedicated in the budget to the Kingston community for childcare places. But then, crickets. You see, the budget was a month ago. The original pledge was 6 months ago. We still don't know where the money is coming from. No one has contacted the Kingston District Council directly. No one from the department has followed them up. They haven't received a quick email or a phone call from the minister or the minister's office. Not even a press release. So they were told before the election that Labor would match the Coalition's commitment. They hear nothing for 6 months. Then we have a budget, no mention on the night, but the following day Anne Ali has the time to contact journalists at ABC South East to confirm the budget was good for Kingston childcare and there's $1.8 million in the budget. But that was a month ago. No one, not the CEO, not the leader of the working party, has heard boo since. I mean, this speaks of a government that's focused on the theoretical but can't get the trains to run on time. Please, Minister Ali, pick up the phone, send an email to the people at the Kingston District Council if they want to hear from you.
I call the member for Corwell.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I want to speak about a very important event that I attended last Tuesday at the Coburg Town Hall. It was the launch of the book Coburg Mosque, A Journey of Turkish Settlement, authored by my very good friend Niall Aycan. Niall Aycan arrived in Australia in 1973 as a migrant from Turkey, settling first in Brunswick and then moving to Broadmeadows, where he has lived ever since. Broadmeadows, Deputy Speaker, as you would know too, in my seat of Cornwall, is an iconic suburb of settlement for Turkish migrants because it is where the first waves of Turks came to settle following the abolition of the White Australia policy. Niall's family was amongst that first wave of migrants. In his long and distinguished career, Niall has worked in the public, private and not-for-profit sector. Niall has been an active community leader working with communities of diverse cultural and religious backgrounds. He has also served as the Executive Director of the Islamic Council of Victoria and is the co-founder of the Turkish Heritage Society of Australia. In taking up the challenge of writing this book, Niall wanted to document the 50-year history of the Coburg Mosque and highlight the very important role it has played in the settlement of Turkish migration here in Australia. To do so, he collected the many stories of Turkish migrants, giving voice to their experiences in the early years of their settlement. And in his own words, Niall says, "I'm neither a historian nor a storyteller. What drove me to write this book is a passionate interest in history, and it took the 50th year milestone achieved by Victoria's Turkish community to convince me that it was time to tell the story of the Coburg Mosque." For Niall, this book was a journey of love, and he was driven by his determination to give purpose and dignity to the lives of those early migrants, but also to do, as Dr. Bulent Hasdalal writes in the foreword, to offer a thoroughly researched historical perspective of the major events that unfolded over the decades and influenced the course of the mosque from its beginning to present day. The author shines a bright light on the Turkish migrant pioneers, leaders, imams and youth who were inspired to create a place of worship and social gathering that would act as a bridge extending from their homeland to their new homeland, Australia. I want to congratulate Niall Aitken on this accomplishment. The book was launched and it was very well attended by a large number of members from the local Turkish community. It's a beautiful book and it's filled with memories and journeys of senior members of the Turkish community who, as Niall says, willingly shared their memories not previously shared with anyone before, because no one has ever asked me this question before, not even my children or grandchildren. Congratulations, Niall, and I certainly look forward to the next edition.
I call the member for Braddon.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, without doubt, the number one issue that people speak to me about is obviously the cost of living, and that is representative of many in this chamber. But it doesn't matter whether you come from the city or the bush, everyone everywhere has been impacted. Current research indicates that 80% of Australians are concerned about rising food and grocery prices. Right now, about 2 million Australians are struggling to put food on the table, and this is alarming. This is impacting around 1.3 million children, Deputy Speaker. The cost of food has continued.
A division has been called for the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions.
Increased 9% in the year to September, helping push overall inflation to north of 7.3%. That's the steepest annual rise in 32 years. 32 years, Deputy Speaker. We live in a prosperous nation and we produce enough food. In fact, we produce enough food for 75 million people. That's enough to feed the entire population 3 times over. But in the last 3 years, Australians have had everything thrown at them, from pandemics to natural disasters, labour shortages, geopolitical tensions, animal disease outbreaks, to financial challenges. The ongoing barrage has laid bare Australia's food supply system. Its discrepancies, there are risks and vulnerabilities. What has been highlighted, however, is the fact that it's time to fully understand the complexity of Australia's food supply chain. How will specific events impact the supply of food from paddock to plate at any given point? I want to congratulate the partner associations who have recently formed the National Food Supply Chain Alliance. The NFCA represents all facets of Australian food supply chain, from farmers, processors, grocers, butchers, independent supermarkets, convenience stores, wholesalers, suppliers and distributors to food chain retailers, cafes, restaurants, hotels and clubs. The 9 associations represent over 160,000 businesses with a combined revenue of a staggering $224 billion. They employ almost 1 million workers in Australia, Deputy Speaker, and there is no doubt that a more efficient food supply chain, a more resilient one, will provide greater stability. It will boost innovation, enhance food processing capacity, create jobs and provide the confidence from farm gate to fork. From the perspective of the government, the Standing Committee on Agriculture has commenced an inquiry into food security in Australia, and the committee will examine how we strengthen and safeguard food security and supply chain resilience. Submissions are open until December 9, and I encourage anyone in the industry with any interest in improving our food supply chain to have your say.
I give the call to the member for Adelaide.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, one of the most common forms of scams that's been brought to my attention in the electorate office, and I'm sure many other members are getting the same queries, is Australia's invoice scams, which are taking place at the moment around the country. Now, according to the ACCC, Australian businesses lost $227 million to payment redirection scams in 2021, an increase of 77%. What invoice scams are is where people intercept through cybercrime an invoice, change the banking account and send it off.
In the House, the proceedings are suspended. Right. I call upon the member for Adelaide in continuation.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And as I was saying previously, the most common forms of scams in Australia are these invoice scams. It's where a cyber criminal intercepts your emails. It could be an invoice that's going out to a client or a customer. They change the banking number. The customer, unknown to them, receives the invoice, pays the bill, but into the scammer's account. And this is happening more often. This could easily be fixed, quite easily, if banks were willing to, and that is to check the name or the business name with the bank details. It's mandated in the UK and in most of Europe, and I'm calling on the banks here to do whatever they can to stop this scamming that's been taking place, that's been costing Australians $227 million in redirection scams in 2021. These scammers impersonate the business, and it is disgraceful that people are losing money. These are hard-working Australians, mainly tradies, I've noticed, plumbers, electricians, builders, etc. For example, a constituent who contacted me last week, he's a plasterer by trade. He recently sent an invoice to a builder which he believed went unpaid. He queried with the builder and was told that the invoice had in fact been paid. My constituent never received the payment, even though the builder provided evidence of the emails received. It turns out that my constituent's emails had been hacked and the invoices amended with a new bank account, leaving my constituent considerably out of pocket. Neither the bank nor the builder feel any responsibility for what has happened. So banks should be able to put this in place. They should be able to, with a simple check the account details with the name or the business name, and that could fix it. I've written to the Minister, Assistant Treasurer, asking that we look into this and see what can be done for my constituent. But the easiest way to fix this is for banks to do the right thing, to ensure that they do a simple check, as is done in the UK and most European countries, to ensure that these scams do not take place. It is so easy to fix, and we're calling on the banks to do this voluntarily, but I have written to the Minister asking that he investigate, have a look at it and see what we can do. Too much money is being lost to hard-working Australians that don't deserve this.
Thank you, member. There being no further constituency statements by honourable members, the next item of business will be called upon. I call upon the clerk.
Government business. Order of the day number 1. Appropriation Bill number 1, 2022-2023. Further consideration in detail.
The proposed expenditure now before the Federation Chamber is for the Climate Change, Energy and Environment and Water Portfolio, $734,090,000. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to. I call upon the Minister for the Environment.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker. It's a great pleasure to contribute to this consideration in detail on the budget measures connected to my portfolios, environment and water. And I'll also touch on the appropriations that fall under the responsibility of the Minister and Assistant Minister for Climate Change and Energy. It's been just 6 months since the new Labor government was elected, and we're absolutely getting on and delivering our commitments. The October budget is a demonstration of that. Australians tell me that they can already see the difference. The environment is back. People are telling me it's a breath of fresh air and what our country desperately needed. Obviously, we can't fix a decade of Liberal Party neglect and damage of our environment overnight, but we've hit the ground running. Higher ambition on climate change, a clear path to net zero, no new extinctions, a crackdown on gases that are bad for the ozone layer, new laws that better protect the environment and give business faster, clearer decisions, an Environmental Protection Agency, a tough cop on the beat to enforce those new laws, a commitment to protect 30% of our land and 30% of our oceans by 2030. We've announced a new nature repair market to reward farmers and other landholders for their work in restoring and protecting the environment. We've committed to expanding blue carbon projects, more mangroves, seagrasses, making our oceans cleaner and getting carbon out of the atmosphere, reducing problematic plastics, developing environmentally friendly plastic alternatives, making recycling easier for families and businesses. There's always more to do, but we are getting on with the job. Madam Acting Deputy Speaker, this budget delivers $1.8 billion in funding into the future for the environment. This is a down payment on our commitment to prioritise the environment after almost a decade of neglect under the former government. The Australian government is delivering on our election promises. There are a range of targeted investments to reverse the declines seen under the previous government. The Australian government will build on the commitments in this budget when we respond to the Samuel review of the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act in coming weeks. In this budget, we see a record $1.2 billion invested to protect and restore our iconic Great Barrier Reef, including $204 million of additional new funding. $90 million over 6 years to employ and upskill 1,000 land care rangers to help conserve and restore our environment. An additional $66.5 million over 6 years to support 10 new Indigenous protected areas, bringing us closer to the government's commitment to protect and conserve 30% of our land and ocean by 2030. This brings the total investment to Indigenous protected areas to $235 million over 5 years. $14.7 million to protect First Nations cultural and heritage places, $224.5 million for actions to help threatened species, places and recovery activities prioritised under the Threatened Species Action Plan, including targeted koala programs, the eradication of gamba grass and yellow crazy ants. $10.8 million to improve ocean and marine park management in Australia and to strengthen our international environmental leadership in ocean-related policy. $91.1 million over 6 years for the first round of our $200 million election promise to improve local waterways through the Urban Rivers and Catchment Program. When I turn to dam and water infrastructure, this Australian government is investing to secure our precious natural water resources for future generations. We will invest more than $1 billion in water infrastructure projects, including Paradise Dam, Cairns Water Security Stage 1, the Mount Morgan Water Supply, Big Rocks Weir, groundwater improvements and water efficiency on the Lower Burdekin, the Pipeline to Prosperity in Tasmania, the Darwin Regional Water Supply, the Adelaide River Science Project, the Nyngan to Cobar Pipeline, strategic planning for improving water security in Queensland, and so much more. We've also put aside $1 billion for future water infrastructure projects that are properly costed and will deliver results. The 2023 budget delivers long overdue investments in Australians' obligations to meet our climate challenge and energy transformation. These investments are central to our economic plan, reducing emissions and developing new industries and jobs as a renewable energy superpower. The international fuel crisis triggered by Russia's illegal war has shown the consequence of a decade of underinvestment and neglect in renewables, the cheapest form of new energy.
Thank you, Minister. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Fairfax.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I think we can certainly all agree that there is a shared purpose within the Australian Parliament of having an orderly decarbonisation of the Australian economy. I would like to think that all Australians, and indeed all parliamentarians, believe that we should have a cleaner future, and one in which Australia itself remains a high wealth, prosperous country, one that is also strong and fiercely independent with its own sovereignty. The question, however, always is going to come down to how. How do we achieve that future vision for our country? And the results are what really count, Deputy Speaker. Certainly, when the coalition was in government, we saw those results in terms of the price of energy, in terms of the reliability of the grid, and also in terms of the emissions being reduced. Emissions reduced by over 20% on 2005 levels. Indeed, a record that the rest of the world finds very difficult to match. Well, of course, when it came to reliability, we saw enormous reliability in the grid under our watch, especially as the Ukraine war started to unravel. We were able to continue to pour more supply into the market of gas. And then, of course, prices. We were able, even in just the last term alone, to see household prices reduce in Australia by 8%, businesses by 10%, industry by 12%. And then we have a new government, though, in town. And under the Albanese Labor government, things have changed, Deputy Speaker. In that time, we have seen power prices go through the roof, and Australians know that. Australian households know it. Indeed, the AWU points out the threat to 800,000 manufacturing jobs in this country because of the skyrocketing prices. We also know that we've had to have unprecedented intervention by the market operator into the grid because of real concerns around reliability, the threat to blackouts. Never before has the operator had to intervene to the extent that it has under this relatively new government's watch. As for emissions reduction, well, only time will tell if the damage that they are prepared to inflict on the Australian economy is resulting in lower emissions. I am also disappointed, can I say, Deputy Speaker, that here we are in consideration in detail, and I at least pay credit to the Minister for Environment and Water for being present today. This is an important part of our... Of course she should turn up, and she's right with that. I take her intervention. She should turn up, but it points to the fact that the Minister for Climate Change and Energy has not turned up. He has not turned up at all. This is his opportunity to hear from colleagues across the aisle, to have consideration in detail, yet he does not show. He is a no-show, and this goes to a problem that we have in Australia at the moment. This minister is absent. For 6 months now, we have seen Australian industry and households struggling under price restraints. The minister is not present. He's not present in the chamber now, and he has not been present for the Australian people. Why? Why is the minister incapable of answering a straight question when it comes to breaking the promise of a $275 reduction in household power bills? Why does the minister fail to ensure his own department does economic modelling on what he signs up to, whether it be the 43% legislation, whether it be the global methane pledge, whether it be the loss and damage fund? At no point has the minister undertaken any economic modelling. So the Australian people, Australian businesses and industries have no idea the impact that this minister is signing up for, both internationally and here in Australia. Why is it that it's taken the minister over 6 months to deal with the energy crisis in Australia? Over 6 months with prices skyrocketing. Still to this day, we wait for the minister and the government to come out with any solution whatsoever. Why is it that the minister continues to dodge question in every single question time, and then, given the opportunity to turn up to consideration in detail, he is yet again absent. That is my key question. Why?
I give the call to the member for Canberra.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and it's a great pleasure to contribute to this consideration in detailed discussion and to be able to ask the Minister for Environment and Water questions about why it is so important that we protect our environment and why the environment is back under the Albanese Labor government and how this is so incredibly important. I'm just blown away by the previous contribution from those opposite who for 10 years did nothing but contribute to a crisis of uncertainty in energy that has set us up for the situation we are in now. Why it is so important that what I want to ask is why it is so important that we transition to renewable energy, why this will help reduce power prices and put us on the path that we need to be on to have a sustainable future for our Earth. You know, pretty central stuff, and stuff that the previous government just ignored for the entire time that they were in government. So our government is instead working to deliver cleaner, cheaper and more secure energy for Australian households and businesses through investment, unprecedented investment in renewable energy, including rewiring the nation to bring our grid up to speed so that it can be ready to transmit that energy from renewable sources which we need. This is a certainty that the private sector needs to invest in renewable energy and what was missing under the previous government. So yes, there is an international markets crisis at the moment caused by Russia's illegal invasion in Ukraine, and that is contributing, but it has exposed Australia's underinvestment to date in the cheapest form of energy, firmed renewables. So Australian households and businesses are now paying that price for a decade of denial and delay in which 3 gigawatts of dispatchable generation exited the grid. Rewiring the Nation is the $20 billion centrepiece of the Powering Australia plan and a key pillar of the 2022-23 budget. It will provide low-cost finance to upgrade, expand and modernise Australia's electricity grid and drive down power prices. We have already secured agreements with the states to invest in crucial links between Tasmania and the mainland in the Marinus Link and between Victoria and New South Wales through the VNI West. Along with other actions in the budget, Rewiring the Nation will help ramp up renewable generation, place downward pressure on energy bills and put Australia on track to becoming a renewable energy superpower. Investment in reforms to stabilise and improve gas and electricity markets also features in this budget, as does delivering on the government's community battery and solar banks policies. And I'm really pleased that the electorate that I represent of Canberra will be receiving one of those community batteries, as well as 2 others in the ACT. And this is about, you know, enabling households to share in those benefits of the reduced power prices from renewable energy and to store that energy. We have already had a great uptake in solar energy in the ACT, rooftop solar, and this is about enabling households that may not be able to do that themselves to be able to actually benefit from these community batteries. So it's a very important thing, and I'm really pleased that Canberra is part of that, part of our federal government's plan. Of course, the ACT is actually the first jurisdiction to get to 100% renewable energy, and we actually already see that reflected in the lower power prices that we enjoy compared to New South Wales. Right. And I think that is a case in point of why this is so important, that as a nation we make that transition, because this is where we need to be. You know, we have fantastic resources, natural advantages in renewable energy here in Australia, and we should be making the most of them and becoming a renewable energy superpower, which is what we should be, leading the way in the world. I am so proud that one of the first things that we did after forming government was to legislate our targets, our emissions reductions targets. Incredibly important, and something that the people of Canberra have been crying out for the whole time that I have been in this place. It has been the thing that people have raised with me more than any other thing, and the thing that I have talked about more in this place. So I'm really pleased to be here today with the Minister to talk about why these things are so critically important for Australia and our world.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Member. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to. I give the call to the member for Sturt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I indeed have questions for the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, which hopefully the Environment Minister.
The division has been called and the House of proceedings are suspended. That's what I say. That's the question is. Yeah. Right. I call upon the member for Sturt.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. So, in continuation, my questions to the Climate Change Minister via the Minister that's here are really related to the rewiring the nation within the Powering Our Nation, I think was the Labor Party's policy document, which essentially underpins the purported modelling to achieve a $275 cut to the average residential household bill by 2025. I've had a lot to do with transmission projects, particularly the South Australia-New South Wales interconnector, so I wish all the success in the world to the spectacular timeline and purported deliverable capacity of this project from an expenditure point of view and from a time point of view. As the Labor Party's policy document reads, the installation of new transmission really underpins the entirety of the presumpted household savings. My first question to the Minister is, can we get an overview and a context and a timeline now that the government is the government and they've had their budget and they've had a lot of time to turn that policy document into government policy? Can we get some confirmation and milestones around the time of that expenditure, what the current anticipated timeline is for the various significant milestones that you go through to plan, design, get environmental approval, planning approval, land acquisition, local agreement from Indigenous groups where relevant, state government authorities, local government authorities, and of course what discussions have been had with the industry and the sector in being able to actually meet the physical requirement of rolling out this additional multi-billion-dollar transmission upgrade to the network, because that underpins almost the entirety of not only the savings but a lot of the purported achievement of emissions reductions. So obviously we'd very much appreciate as much information and detail we can get on that. And I'd also like just an update regarding the $275 cut was as at the Labor Party's announcement of that policy in December 2021. So could we just get the new figure on how much you're going to save by 2025 after you've factored in what you confirm in this budget to be a 56% increase in electricity prices in the 22-23 and 23-24 years. So we all know that you're going to honour that commitment, the $275 cut from the December 2021 period by 2025. So what will it be in dollar terms against the new projected June 2024 residential bills after they're increased by the 56% that the budget takes into account? So if we could also get that new figure, which I assume will be $275 plus the increase to residential bills in the intervening period, so that the good people of Australia know how much their bill is going to fall between June 2024 and June 2025, when the $275 cut on December 2021 prices is taken into account. And it would also be good because the the Labor Party policy document on this transmission policy indicated the impact at the wholesale level and at the retail level, broken down to households as well as businesses, etc. So I think all those groups, households but equally businesses, major industries, etc., would like to know at the full implementation of this policy and keeping the solemn word to the people of Australia from that policy document, how much will power bills be cut between 2024 and 2025 for other sectors such as the average small business bill as well. I reiterate, we're very keen if the Minister can please confirm the timeline for rolling out the Rewiring the Nation transmission infrastructure, because that is absolutely vital to achieve any of the emissions reductions projections in that policy document, as well as the cost savings.
Thank you, Member. The question is that the proposed expenditure for the climate change, energy and environment and water portfolio be agreed to. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, no. I think the ayes have it. The motion is carried. What is the next?
Pardon me. Treasury. That'll be it. Here we go. The proposed expenditure now before the Federation Chamber is for the Treasury portfolio, $361,747,000. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I call the Minister.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Well, 6 months ago, the Albanese Labor government was elected on a mandate to be a better government, and that starts with an honest conversation with the Australian people to ensure we are able to do good policy. You don't do good policy unless you have an honest conversation with the Australian people about the facts. We're also committed to ensuring that we manage the budget and put it on a sustainable footing. To this end, the waste, to address record debt and to put economic growth back on a stable footing, work is already underway. Millions of Australians are counting on us to deliver on that mandate. So we're getting wages moving again. We're supporting an increase to the minimum wage and strengthening our industrial relations system. This will deliver wage increases for millions of Australian workers who have been languishing on low or no wage increases for over a decade. Our childcare reforms are giving 1.2 million working families the option of taking on more hours and earning more money. Our aged care reforms, targeted investments, which is prioritising delivering more nursing care, more nutritious food, on more hours, and ensuring that we can provide better pay for those who are looking after our seniors. Our responsible targeted investments are prioritising measures that provide an economic return, not a political payoff. Now, that's a novel approach over the last 9 years, but it's the approach the Australian people have voted for. I want to say a few things about budget measures aimed at tax avoidance. The Albanese government is committed to investing in the capabilities of our tax regulators to increase receipts by around $5.7 billion over the forward estimates. That's $5.7 billion that will be put into cheaper medicines, cheaper childcare, better aged care and deficit reduction. The investment in our tax regulators over the forward estimates includes $1.1 billion to increase and extend funding for the Tax Avoidance Task Force, which focuses on multinational, large businesses and high wealth tax avoidance. It complements the measures that my colleague, the Assistant Minister, will be addressing in relation to multinational tax avoidance at large. It also includes $242.9 million to extend the Shadow Economy program for a further 3 years, which helps stop dishonest and criminal activities outside of our tax system. $80.3 million to extend the personal income taxation compliance program for a further 2 years to support individuals to pay the right amount of tax on time, and $20.8 million for the Tax Practitioners Board to increase compliance investigations on high-risk tax practitioners. The Albanese government is committed to providing a clear signal that tax avoidance will not be tolerated. The integrity of our tax system is built upon every taxpayer believing and having faith that every other taxpayer is doing the right thing.
Order. A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I call the Minister on continuation.
As I was saying, we are committed to ensuring that every cent that is owed through the taxation system is paid, because that's the integrity. Australians have faith in our tax system if they can look to their left and look to their right and know that all Australians are paying the right amount of tax as is lawfully due. I want to say something about scams. Last year, Australian households and businesses lost around $2 billion to scams. That's an estimate. It's probably more than that because there's a hell of a lot of underreporting. Indeed, this year the ACCC expects that number to be at least $4 billion. Getting scammed will turn a precarious financial situation into a disaster. And it's not just the financial cost, it's the personal cost as well, and the time that is taken into rectifying your personal and your business and your financial situation. Scammers are targeting our most vulnerable individuals. It's why the government is making a priority to crack down on scams. $12.6 million over 4 years in this budget. More to come, a real plan to crack down on scammers and protect Australian households.
The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I call the Shadow Treasurer.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, before I ask my question, I'd like to make a few comments about the budget. It was a budget that sank to the bottom of the ocean faster than the Titanic. Probably in 100 years' time, a rusting hulk will be discovered deep beneath the ocean of nothingness, absolute nothingness, because that's what the budget was, which makes it very difficult to ask questions about it. However, I will make some comments about it before I do attempt to ask a question about this load of nothingness, because this was an incredible missed opportunity. The economy and the budget were in unexpected health. We saw a 3.9% real economic growth rate in the last financial year. We saw a budget with a massive turnaround, a $48 billion turnaround in the budget underlying cash balance from the budget forecasts. And of course, from the moment that New South Wales and Victoria were locked down, we saw a budget that was in balance through to the end of the financial year. So this was a chance for Labor to consolidate the strength of that position and in the process take pressure off the pressures that Australian households and businesses, families are feeling on interest rates and inflation. And they are very real pressures, Deputy Speaker, very real pressures, as they approach Christmas and they're looking at Christmas presents and holidays over the January period. There is no doubt that the tightening of budgets is really being felt because of that increase in interest rates and cost of living. So the opportunity for the government was to deliver a budget that was responsible and that would do what treasurers normally do when they come into a role, which is to deliver a budget which is improving year on year. In fact, what we saw, remarkably, was a budget that made the budget deficit worse over the coming years, going from a $32 billion deficit up to a $51 billion deficit. And you say to yourself, well, how on earth could they have done that as we're coming out of a pandemic? And the answer is they added $115 billion of spending since the March budget. $115 billion of spending as we come out of the pandemic. Now, that is a Herculean feat. It really is, to have pulled off that kind of outcome. And the Treasurer, of course, has chosen on a famous occasion to mishear questions about the budget, because I'd be mishearing questions about the budget. I'd be mishearing questions about the budget when I'd achieved such a dreadful outcome as he did in this budget. Now, when you look at what economists have to say, they reflect this point. Stephen Koukoulas, not on our side of politics, former economist to Julia Gillard, says, and I quote, the budget puts no downward pressure on inflation, leaving, in quotes, the RBA with all the work of carrying the can in getting the inflation rate lower. Carrying the can. You left them carrying the can. Warren Hogan wrote in the AFR, federal fiscal policy, former ANZ economist, federal fiscal policy has failed to join the fight against inflation, preferring to sit on the sidelines, sitting on the sidelines and cheering on the Independent Reserve Bank as it takes up the task. And then we see the spectre in recent days of them bagging out the governor. Well, they've left him with the job. They've left him with the job, Deputy Speaker. He's the one that actually has to deal with this situation, because their budget does absolutely nothing. And of course, since the budget was released, we've seen annual inflation hit 7.3%, the highest level in 3 decades. I was looking at the bond rate, the cash rate expected in the futures market. It's expected to go close to 4 percentage points. 4%. That puts mortgages in the 6 to 7% range. That's where the market expects it to go. We've got a long way to go here. A lot of pain to be felt. And sadly, we have no plan. We have a white flag from those opposite. Absolutely nothing to contribute. I tell you what, this is a government with an excuse for everything and a plan for nothing. And the result is a family with a $750,000 mortgage is now paying more than $1,200 every month on their repayments compared to May this year, and there is a lot further to go. So given this budget has no plan to tackle inflation, my question to the Assistant Treasurer, seeing the Treasurer hasn't found the time to turn up to answer questions, will the Assistant Treasurer confirm they have left the RBA carrying the can to fight against inflation?
The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I call the Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And of course, this budget was the right budget for the right times, Deputy Speaker. It did try and deal with inflation. It is trying to deal with cost of living while putting downward pressure on inflation, and we're doing that through our measures in terms of cheaper childcare, cheaper childcare, cheaper medicines, and of course more affordable homes, which I want to talk about a little bit, and of course extending paid parental leave. And Mr Speaker, with the housing measures, we announced in the budget the Housing Accord, which is our aspiration for 1 million homes over 5 years from 2024 to 2029. And of course, this is a historic agreement. It's an intergenerational agreement whereby we have the 3 tiers of government together, local government, state government and federal governments working together to deliver with the construction sector and with social housing providers to ensure that we keep up supply of dwellings in this country. We know that here in Australia there is a severe shortage of dwellings. When you look at the OECD average compared to what is happening in Australia in housing, we have a long way to go. We need to get more supply into the market, and that is what we want to do, Deputy Speaker.
A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions.
And we're obviously working to establish that fund and to get to work on those social and affordable homes. And I do want to thank the state ministers and indeed local government and social housing providers for their active engagement in terms of delivering on that 30,000 in the first 5 years of the fund. We also, of course, are moving in terms of a National Affordability and Supply Council to get advice to tiers of government about what else we can do to get more homes on the ground more quickly in terms of supply. We also, of course, had in the budget our regional first home buyer guarantee, and I can update the House to say that we now have over 1,000 applications for the first regional homeowner guarantee. It was great to see earlier in the week, I think it was the Townsville Bulletin, with a couple going into their first home, and they'll be in that home and have the keys before Christmas. And this is the difference that good government policy can make for people. It can change lives. The regional first home buyer guarantee, of course, is whereby people can, with a 5% deposit, get into their first home with the government guaranteeing the other 15%. And that, of course, helps them overcome that hurdle of the 20% deposit. It is a terrific scheme, and I was pleased to see that number hit over the 1,000. And, Deputy Speaker, I did want to take the opportunity to talk about some of the things we are doing to support small businesses as well. We, of course, have legislated the unfair contract terms. This is something those on the other side talked about for 9 years. We have actually legislated this in the first 6 months so that smaller businesses can have fair terms when negotiating with big businesses and big providers. We, of course, have been working in terms of payment times. People may have seen the report about big business payment times to small business. We know that there is a lot more work to be done there, and we're working to try and deliver on our election promise in terms of trying to improve business payment times for small businesses. We also, of course, have amended the government Commonwealth procurement rules to make sure that small businesses get a better access to the $70 billion each year that the government goes to tender, and that is a 20% target for Commonwealth procurement. So we are moving to improve things for small business. We also, as I said in the House earlier in the week, we have found room in the budget to extend 2 measures that were due to end on the 31st of December, and they are about mental health and wellbeing program run by Beyond Blue. And this is a free program for small businesses. They don't need to go to the GP. They don't need to get a mental health plan. They can access the services from Beyond Blue to give them some support. And, of course, the Small Business Debt Hotline. That will help small businesses. It is targeted support, specialists in small businesses that can provide advice to those small businesses. And we know that have been doing it tough, and we know that small businesses have been doing it tough as we come out of the global pandemic, that are dealing with natural disasters such as floods, and our government will continue to support small businesses, will continue to be there for small businesses, and will continue to make sure they're at the heart of our government's decision-making.
The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I call the member for Fadden.
Thanks, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm cognisant of the time and trying to get through everything before we get to the adjournment at 1 o'clock, so I will be brief. In terms of the budget, it is a missed opportunity to continue to set lines and standards. Being an ERC minister, when the last government brought the budget into balance, the rules of budget balance are quite simple. 75% is receipts and 25% is expenditure. That's what has to be managed. We did that by having a speed bump, 23.9% of GDP in terms of tax receipts. So that forms a basis by which government can live within its means, and a basis by which government does not tax its population too much, noting that when we came in 2013, the previous Labor government, receipts had dropped down to 22.5% in 2011 and 12, courtesy of the GFC. But likewise, living within your means, we also set a spending cap at 1.9% of growth. That year on year, the growth of spending wouldn't increase beyond 1.9%. So that as the economy grew, expenditure of government didn't. And the increase of tax receipts and the decrease of expenditure equals a balanced budget. Unfortunately, this budget is a missed opportunity. Those speed bumps are gone. There's no limit on government debt. There's no 23.9% limit on receipts in terms of percentage of GDP, and there's no limit on government expenditure. And that is why we've seen in the out years government debt, as in deficits, increasing. We saw as soon as New South Wales and Victoria came out of lockdown, the budget for those months started to come back into balance. But unfortunately, with $115 billion in new spending, those tax limits have been run over. And that's why this budget is now running away. We're seeing unemployment going up, 150,000 more Australians unemployed. This government was bequeathed an unemployment level that dropped to 3.4%, an extraordinary level, lowest in 50 years, with participation rate at its highest. Government needs to ensure the economy runs smoothly. Inflation is not fed by extra spending, and people have the opportunity to keep those jobs. We're seeing power prices coming up because the government's ill-advised approach on legislating. 56% in the next 2 years, compared to an average of 0.3% year on year over the previous government. The budget is unfortunately a missed opportunity to balance, a missed opportunity for fiscal restraint, and Australians will pay for it.
The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to. I call the Minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise in the government's budget. Do I understand that? Let me pause for a moment. If the, I don't want to intrude on the member for Curtin. If she understood that she was to have the call, I'm happy to yield my time.
No, that's why we're just going to let her quickly speak and then go straight to you. But you want to right?
No. If there's been an arrangement, then I'm happy to yield to the member for Curtin.
I'll give the call to the member for Curtin.
Yep.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to discuss Treasury's budget measures and ask for some clarifications. Firstly, the inclusion of measuring what matters, the discussion paper on the wellbeing economy, is a great start. It's a step in the right direction to start considering the broader picture of what prosperity would look like in the long term. It'll be really vital that this is built on broad community engagement and views about what we value and what we think a successful country looks like, rather than just sitting in Treasury. Now, while it may take longer to build consensus on what we care about than it would for Treasury to adapt a pre-design model from another jurisdiction, this engagement work is essential in rebuilding trust in our democracy and building a common understanding of the context in which we'll need to make difficult decisions. So my first question is whether Treasury has allocated any funding to support community engagement on setting a common vision to underpin a wellbeing budget. Secondly, I'd like to know whether Treasury is being resourced to undertake the longer-term tax reform that we desperately need. A stalemate over genuine tax reform has evolved between the major parties over the last 30 years, with ideology overriding facts and evidence. Every Australian loses because of this. Our tax system's robustness is in continual decline, which increasingly undermines our ability to provide essential services and a reasonable social safety net at both the federal and the state and territory levels. The government has the opportunity to build on the wellbeing framework proposed to seek a consensus on where we want to be in 20 years. This would enable us to make the harder decisions about the trade-offs in our tax system. I'd like to thank the government for the focus on the housing shortage in the budget, but I have two questions about how this might work. The government said it will invest $10 billion in the Housing Australian Future Fund, which will generate funds to build social and affordable homes. Can the Treasurer or Assistant Treasurer please explain the modelling undertaken for this $10 billion allocation? How does the chosen level of allocation relate to forecast demand for housing, which is significantly higher than 30,000 homes? The government also said it will provide $350 million over 5 years to support funding of an additional 10,000 affordable homes under a housing accord. The announcement was accompanied with grand statements of how the government's shared ambition with all levels of government, institutional investors and the construction sector was to build 1 million homes between 2024 and 2029. Can the Treasurer please outline how the housing accord will actually work in an environment of labour shortages, delayed supply chains and the rising cost of materials, and what financing model can deliver 1 million homes with a relatively small investment from government? Do the increasing stresses on the construction industry change this aspirational figure? I'd also be keen to understand more about the $36.1 million commitment to restoring Treasury's capability on climate risks and opportunities. My initial response is horror that it's going to cost $29.8 million to restore capability for Treasury officials to be able to model climate risks and opportunities. It seems surprising that at this point in history this skill set doesn't already exist. But given this is where we are, could the Treasurer please outline how this figure will be spent? How do you restore capability? Is this being allocated to training or to acquire new skilled employees? And how will the success of this funding be measured? Thank you.
The question is that the proposed expenditure for the Treasury portfolio be agreed to. All of those of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The proposed expenditure now before the Federation Chamber is for the Employment and Workplace Relations portfolio. $397,239,000. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I call the Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. I rise to go to a division, I think.
A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions.
Minister. Thank you.
I give the call to the Minister in continuation.
My apologies for coming in a little late, but I'm glad to be able to make some comments in relation to the decision by government to invest in skills. The budget handed down by the Treasurer was an important one. It's to ensure that we supply skills to a labour market that really has skill shortages across it. Whatever profession or industry you look at, there are skill deficits. The National Skills Commission last report indicated, I think really, or underlined the scale of the challenge for the country by indicating that there'd been a almost doubling of the occupations on the skills shortage list from 153 to 286 occupations in 12 months. That speaks to an economy and labour market that's starved of skills. There's a variety of reasons for that. Firstly, understandably, the closure of borders by the previous government meant there was obviously a slowing down, a suspension of normal skilled migration pathways, and we supported the previous government when they were compelled to close borders at a time when we were dealing with a global pandemic and with no vaccination in sight, Deputy Speaker, quite understandably. What we didn't agree with the previous government was the failure to support temporary visa holders in the labour market, making them ineligible for JobKeeper and JobSeeker, which compounded the skills deficit, and it's something we now need to attend to. I'm happy to say the investment by this government in the skills agenda is quite significant. We made an announcement at the Jobs and Skills Summit to commit to 180,000 fee-free TAFE and VET places for 2023. That provides certainty to the VET sector, provides certainty to industry that there'll be courses undertaken in skills that are in demand, whether it be the traditional trades, whether it's aged care, whether it's advanced manufacturing, hospitality, retail, many sectors that are suffering from a shortage of labour and skills. In fact, the OECD has said that Australia has the second highest labour shortage per capita in the developed world, and therefore it's critical that we move very quickly. Now, that decision made by the Prime Minister and Premiers at National Cabinet, announced at the Jobs and Skills Summit, has led to discussions that I've had with all eight other governments who, of course, help deliver the training in the VET sector. We are moving very rapidly to allocate those places to particular areas of the economy and labour market where they are in need. So we are focusing on skill shortage areas. These are, in many cases, they are fee-free places which will provide much-needed relief, economic relief for those people who need to undertake these courses to acquire skills so that they have skills that are in demand, Deputy Speaker. And for that reason, we support the state and territory governments making the decisions that they are. I was fortunate to be in Adelaide last Friday, where there was an announcement by the South Australian Government and the Commonwealth about the allocation of 12,500 additional places for next year. There's progress across all jurisdictions, including Victoria, Western Australia, New South Wales, and I'll be making some more announcements before Christmas to make sure this matter is moved on as quickly as possible. We were left with a skills deficit. We were left without a national skills agreement, Deputy Speaker, an agreement that should have been struck from the 1st of July this year for a 5-year period. That didn't happen. We need to negotiate now some reforms for the vet sector, but to provide certainty for this year and next calendar year, we've undertaken that investment, and that is now being progressed. And of course, it means that people that are looking for work in and the acquisition of new skills or reskilling in the workforce will mean, as a result of the decision and the provisions of the budget, those courses will be available for students across the country commencing next year.
I thank the Minister for his contribution. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I give the call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm pleased to rise to speak on the Appropriations Bill in relation to employment and workplace relations as part of this consideration and detailed process. Mr Speaker, Deputy Speaker, the Albanese government's approach to employment and workplace relations is framed around a simple concept: delivering for the unions. Since being elected, the Minister for Workplace Relations and the government have done all they can to impose a big union agenda on employers and employer organisations. We had the union conference masquerading as the Jobs and Skills Summit, where the government claimed a consensus reached on industrial relations law changes. And we've seen a government which is seeking to impose the most radical shake-up of our industrial relations system in decades, a shake-up that would create, complicate and damage.
A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions. And I give the call to the Manager of Opposition Business in continuation.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I was observing previously that this government is seeking to impose the most radical shake-up of our industrial relations system in decades, a shake-up that would complicate, create conflict and damage in our economy. It's no surprise that a wide range of business and employer groups have expressed extreme concerns. This bill that the government is presently taking through the parliament seeks to implement the wish list of the big unions, the union bosses. The militant CFMEU aggressively fought against the Registered Organisations Commission because its abolition would effectively shield unions such as the CFMEU from scrutiny, and the government has legislated in accordance with the wishes of the CFMEU. The CFMEU also campaigned for years on abolition of the Australian Building Construction Commission because the Commission prosecuted and pursued the union for its lawless conduct. And again, this government has acted in accordance with the wishes of the CFMEU. And we've long seen a campaign from the ACTU on multi-employer bargaining, because the union movement is seeking to expand its power, to expand the membership of unions and to dictate to businesses, including small businesses, the way they should conduct their affairs. And this bill that the government is pursuing gives effect to the ACTU's objectives. The multi-employer bargaining provisions amount to an intent by the union to kill off the union movement, to kill off enterprise bargaining and replace it with a new centralised wage-fixing system and a new umpire. And the opposition has made it very clear that we're opposed to the compulsion inherent in the legislation and the single interest employer authorisation provisions. Mr Deputy Speaker, there are a number of questions that the opposition wishes to ask, and I note that the Minister for Workplace Relations is not in the chamber, but the questions that the opposition would wish to ask, and I trust that the Minister at the table will be able to answer on behalf of the government. Can the Minister inform the parliament how many small businesses and how many small business representative bodies have informed him and informed the government that they are in support of this government's extreme changes to industrial relations? Can the Minister inform the parliament specifically how many employer stakeholder groups have voiced their support for the provisions related to multi-employer bargaining? We've heard extensive claims from the Minister in relation to the likely impacts of this bill in relation to wages. So I ask the Minister, can he inform the parliament by precisely how much will wages rise as a consequence of this legislation? And I ask further, the estimate that is provided, what is the basis for that estimate? And in particular, has economic modelling been done by the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations, or by the Treasury, or by consultancies engaged by those organisations in relation to expected wage rises? And I further ask, over what time period will those wage rises occur? And I further ask, what consideration has the government given to the risk of a wage price spiral and an entrenchment of inflation across the economy, building on the already sobering developments we are seeing in relation to inflation in Australia? I further ask, can the Minister advise whether any modelling was done by the Department for Employment and Workplace Relations or Treasury as to likely productivity gains as a result of this bill? And I further ask, in any of the modelling that's been done, what consideration was given to the extra time, cost and resources required to be allocated by a wide range of small businesses who face now the prospect of being dragged into multi-employer bargaining processes against their will and consent, and what additional costs will that impose on small businesses?
The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I'll give the call to the...
No, just put the question there.
Are there no further speakers?
No.
No. All right. There being no further speakers, I'll put the... Are there any further speakers on this? All right. I'll give the member the call.
Thank you very much.
That's not your decision.
Are you speaking on workplace relations?
Yeah. Oh, then it won't matter because she's talking workplace relations too.
She's on our schedule.
Yeah.
That's right.
As there's no government member seeking the call, I'll alternate, and I'll give the call to the member who's speaking, the member for Curtin.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the employment and workplace relations budget measures, and I'd like to focus my comments and questions on changes to the funding of the Fair Work Commission. The Secure Jobs Better Pay Bill, which is likely to pass through Parliament in the next week, will make significant changes to the workload of the Fair Work Commission. Some of this likely change is recognised with increased funding, but some is not recognised, and I, as well as constituents and others, am concerned that the Fair Work Commission may become a bottleneck, preventing wages from increasing. Firstly, I want to clarify whether a function of the Fair Work Commission has new funding or not. I acknowledge that the functions of the Registered Organisations Commission are transferred to the Fair Work Commission, with a $7.7 million defunding from the Fair Work Ombudsman and Registered Organisations Commission entity, and corresponding additional funding to the Fair Work Commission. This seems inconsistent with the text below in the bill, which says that...
The member for Curtin will resume her seat. A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions.
Oh, there she is.
Here we are. And I give the call to the member for Curtin in continuation.
Thirdly, and more broadly, if the IR bill passes in its current form or close to it, the Fair Work Commission is about to significantly increase its responsibilities and powers beyond the areas already discussed for which additional funding has been allocated. Many of these changes require or increase the likelihood of the intervention of the Fair Work Commission into agreements and industrial disputes. This would include intervening when employees and businesses can't agree on flexible working arrangements, resolving intractable bargaining, disputes through arbitration where there's no reasonable prospect of an agreement being reached. Just a bit puffed, excuse me. Determining whether to authorise workers with common interest to bargain together. This will be complex and will require an in-depth understanding of different types of businesses to determine whether there's a genuine common interest. Dealing with the growth in sector-wide industrial disputes under multi-employer bargaining and arbitrating multi-employer bargaining across a large number of businesses. I note that the total agency resourcing for 2022-23 has increased by 12% to 95 million compared to 85 million in 21-22. The Fair Work Ombudsman will also need to undertake the current workload of the Australian Building and Construction Commission. While it's acknowledged that there is a reduction in the scope being transferred to the Fair Work Ombudsman, there's still a significant additional workload if it takes on some of the caseload. Can the Minister please inform the House whether he believes that these additional functions can be done within the funding already allocated? And if so, what assumptions were used to estimate the additional workload for each body? My concern is that an additional unfunded workload for the Fair Work Commission will make the Fair Work Commission a bottleneck, contrary to the government's intention of increasing wages in a rapid fashion. Thank you.
The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I give the call to the member for Moncrieff.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Let's not mince our words. Labor's Industrial Relations Bill is a disgracefully bad bill. It's the enemy of small and family business across this country. On full display from this government is incompetence and money for their masters at the highest level. Badly constructed legislation that so far has been amended 150 times by its own creators and contains errors and has union bosses licking their lips. The bill clearly delivers one thing. It pays back in full, with interest, the $100 million in donations that unions have given Labor since 2007. 9 years in opposition for those opposite was a long time to amass such a large debt to the union bosses, and they've had to wait until now to get their money back, and with it, lip-smacking interest in the form of union membership fees and ultimately more power. Power to remove the employer's right to put deals to a vote by their employees, power to veto employers' multi-employer deals, and power to force employers to get written approval from each relevant union before a vote can take place in their own business. In their own business. Legislating for unions to have the right of veto to stop employees voting on an agreement is outrageous. It unfairly hands unions a completely unacceptable level of control. This bill is totally unacceptable to every small business in this country with more than 14 staff, or even 20 staff as it may end up, be they part-time, casual or full-time. The tidal wave of the Labor wreckage is coming. I ask, how can those opposite sleep at night with the knowledge that this bill risks the livelihood of hundreds of thousands of families across Australia with long-lasting damaging impacts to our economy? This bill will see small businesses forced into the same agreements as much larger employers, which is totally unfair. Small businesses will have to pay $14,600 just to sit at the bargaining table, including their consultancy fees, and now we know that Labor's error in the regulatory impact statement pushes up costs further for medium business, from $75,000 to $80,000. We saw the National Farmers Federation warn that these changes will lead to increased industrial action in the agricultural sector, which could cripple supply chains and lead to food shortages. Many small businesses already pay their staff above award rates.
Her seat. A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions. I give the call to the member for Moncrieff in continuation.
Many small businesses already pay their teams above award rates to keep their business going. They pay themselves less due to the extra hours they have to put in and increasing costs that are squeezing their margins. And under these laws, the daily break-even will increase substantially for small business to the point of unsustainability. Close the doors and walk out. That's what we're talking about here, Speaker. As a Liberal, I believe in rewarding hard work with lower taxes and incentives for entrepreneurs. But Labor wants to break the small business model. They want to crush aspiration and dreams. And this bill delivers power to the unions to run amok inside those dreams. That's not a dream, Deputy Speaker. That's a Labor nightmare, a nightmare akin to the 70s and 80s industrial strikes. And decisions will be made by the unions, not directors or CEOs. Operation managers and general managers might as well hang up their boots once Fair Work becomes the umpire for decision-making in small and family business. I ask those opposite, does the availability of a worker miraculously create a job? Well, I would argue that it's the entrepreneur's business that creates that job.
If no one else is seeking the call on... Oh, sorry. A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions. And I give the call to the member for Moncrieff in continuation.
It's the entrepreneur's business that creates the pay packet, the taxes, the GST, the superannuation, the opportunity to work and the job security. As I've outlined, businesses simply cannot afford to pay higher electricity bills, higher interest rates, higher inflation and increased wages under this government that is making simply a bad situation worse. So I asked the minister to outline how many and which small businesses were directly consulted when planning this wrecking ball through small and medium enterprises. What I do know, Mr Deputy Speaker, is that the Coalition will always stand up for small and medium enterprises. We will continue to fight against these proposed changes before the Senate now. We all want to see higher wages for Australians, but this bill is bad for the economy, it's bad for business, it's bad for employers and ultimately it's bad for Australians across our country. Remember, to those opposite, it is not the worker that creates the job. It's the small and medium enterprise that creates the job to deliver security in their job, in their work, for their families, for their communities. And this is the fabric of small and family businesses are the fabric of our community on the Gold Coast. And so we oppose this bill in its entirety. Thank you very much.
And I thank the member for Moncrieff for her perseverance. I understand there is a desire not to go to the adjournment, but to instead to continue this debate. So if you could just give us a moment. What we were told by your head officers, but
So we'll go to finance, which will be Sally. Yes. Who's doing finance?
Okay, and then we'll go on to finance. Okay.
Adjournment after this. I've just been told we're going to adjourn. Our side, we're happy with going to adjournment. I thought that agreement had just been made.
Minister, what's your understanding of the government's wishes? And what let's adjourn. Okay, let's put the question, and then have you got the have you got the screen? Okay. Order. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I will put the question. The question is that the proposed expenditure for the Employment and Workplace Relations portfolio be agreed to. All of those of that opinion say aye. Against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Deputy Speaker, I move that the chamber do now be adjourned. No. The debate. I move that the debate now be adjourned.
Yeah, okay.
The motion's been moved that the debate be adjourned. All of those opinions say aye. No say no. The ayes have it. And I give the call to the Minister.
I move that the Federation Chamber do now adjourn.
All those of that opinion say aye.
Can we just have a seconder?
Oh, sorry, is the motion seconded?
And then call Ms Sharkey.
And I call the member for Mayo.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak with respect to local health service concerns being felt throughout the Mayo community. And on top of the list is access to a GP. Critical GP shortages and the failure of the Medicare rebate to keep up with the cost of providing services are raised with me constantly. Regional communities are already experiencing GP closures and reduced services, and those GPs who remain have all but ceased bulk billing, even their most vulnerable patients. My team spoke with a constituent who lives with rheumatoid arthritis. She says that she goes back to her doctor every 5 days to get a new prescription for pain medication, costing her more than $60 per visit just to get a repeat prescription, and this is causing significant financial distress to her. People with ongoing health concerns and those on pensions are being forced to choose which condition they can afford to get treated, or whether they visit their GP and get the medication they need to pay their bills. I've met with the Minister for Health and Aged Care and request the Minister to take urgent action to address this issue. And in particular, I urge the government, once the Strengthening Medicare Task Force delivers its recommendations in a few weeks, to work with the sector to better encourage and enable our GPs to bulk bill. There are no quick fixes, we all know that, but increased Medicare rebates and indexing GP items using appropriate pricing processes would help, and we need to act quickly. My community, in fact the entire community of South Australia, is also in desperate need of the Flinders Medical Centre Kidney Health Registry, and this should be national, to assist with monitoring the quality of care and development of better healthcare policies for those with kidney disease. Most importantly, the registry would be patient-focused, enabling patients and their families to share their experiences, not just purely recording clinical data. Recently, myself and the member for Boothby met with the Minister for Health and the team at the Kidney Registry to talk about this very exciting proposal, and I hope that the government will support this. Mr Speaker, my electorate of Mayo has the oldest demographic.
Okay. The member will resume her seat. A division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable the honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions.
A soft cut off.
Yeah, I'll just we'll just wait a moment to allow the member for Mayo to. And I give the call to the member for Mayo in continuation.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My electorate of Mayo has the oldest demographic of any federal electorate in South Australia and is among the top 10 oldest in the nation. So imagine my surprise when I became aware that when there were 8 aged care service officers for Service Australia to be deployed across South Australia, there was not one deployed for Mayo, even Victor Harbour, which has a median age of over 60 years. And so I was deeply concerned about this, and I must thank the Minister for government services, because I went and met with the Minister and said, look, we really need one of these officers in South Australia, in my electorate of Mayo, and I'm very thankful that the Minister listened, heard my pleas, and an officer will be deployed to the Victor Harbour region around January this year. My understanding is that they're undertaking the recruitment now. This is going to be a real game changer for the people of Victor Harbour, Goolwa and right across our south coast, to have an aged care services officer to support our community sitting within Services Australia. And I say that, Mr Speaker, because many older Australians find entering Centrelink and trying to deal with Centrelink and My Aged Care incredibly complex, particularly if they do not have computer skills. And many older Australians manage to go through their whole career without needing to turn on a computer. So this assumption that we would have for that generation to equip themselves and have those skills now, I think is really incredibly unrealistic. So I'm very pleased that the Minister listened to me, heard the pleas of my community, and the implementation of that service officer, the Aged Care Services Officer, will be with us in Mayo in the new year. Mr Speaker, there is so much to talk about when it comes to health, and one thing I will say, and I've known this since the day I was elected, is health is the most important issue in my community, the most important policy area, and I look forward to continuing to work with government and to also talk fearlessly in the parliament about the great needs that we have in Mayo to ensure that we have a healthy and vibrant community. Thank you.
The motion is that the Federation Chamber do now adjourn, and I give the call to the member for Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. There are many amazing community leaders and stories in my electorate of Robertson that I have become aware of as I continue to meet and talk with my constituents in the community. Over Saturday, November 19, across Australia, McDonald's restaurants hosted their annual McHappy Day, which is a day committed to raising awareness and funds for its charitable arm, Ronald McDonald House.
The member will resume his seat. The division has been called for in the House. The proceedings are suspended to enable honourable members to attend the division. The proceedings will resume when the Chair of the Federation Chamber is resumed at the conclusion of the division or subsequent divisions. And I give the call to the member for Robertson in continuation.
I had the pleasure of being invited to help on McHappy Day at Woy Woy McDonald's. Here I met with the Central Coast McDonald's franchisee, Mr Ron Musali, and the super hard-working Cassandra Webber, zone manager. Ron and Cassie took me through the excellent work Ronald McDonald House charities undertake and the impact it has on assisting families with sick children across the nation. They also provided me with an insightful tour of McDonald's restaurant at Woy Woy and showed me the behind-the-scenes equipment and technology customers are often not aware of, that ensure orders are completed in a timely manner. Following this, I got straight into helping raise funds for McHappy Day, helping collect spare coins as customers arrived at the restaurant, and even helped on the drive-through, helping organise orders and handing them to customers. And I can confirm, Mr Deputy Speaker, that I got every order correct and did not miss a nugget. And the whole hour that I was there was a thrill, and I know that the McDonald's restaurants across the Central Coast and across Australia raised a great deal of money for Ronald McDonald House charities, and I thank Ron, Cassie and all the employees that helped ensure a successful fundraising effort on McHappy Day in 2022. During Friday, the 18th of November, I received a message about a fundraising campaign organised by the Terrigal Trojans rugby team. They were undertaking a massive 24-hour rowing fundraising event. I came down and saw the campaign in full swing at Impact Gym in Erina. I've been told that at the completion of the 24-hour period, the campaign had managed to raise a phenomenal $9,480 and rowed a massive 411 kilometres collectively. An unreal achievement for the Terrigal Trojans, and one that the whole community on the Central Coast is very proud of. This is the second year the Terrigal Trojans have completed a Trojan Row, and I wish to thank all the players that were involved in this year's campaign, staff, coaches and supporting businesses on a successful fundraising event. Some of these members included the team at Caden Drainage, the Traden team, Craig McWilliam, Karen Stanton, Daniel Stevenson, Adam McCormick, Anthony Watmow, Darren Higgins, Brett Stewart, Brent Kite, Sean Timmins, Glenn Stewart and his team at Oak Services Group, Jamie Crooks and everyone at Richard Crooks Construction, Wayne Pearce and his business Wayne Pearce Advantage, Mick Belinda and the team at Impact Gym, Luke and Rowan Tucker at Tuxco, Jason Stenning, Melanie Stenning, John Fleming and everyone at Industry Group, Alan and Lorraine Gaffney from Terrigal Benevolent Committee, John Stevens and the Stevens Group, Simon Denmead and the team at Connect Sydney, Peter Cox and Leadership Dynamics and Adam Rose and his family, Michelle, Jordan and Tamika. I know that the funds that have been raised by this group during this massive fundraising effort, all 411 kilometres of that fundraising effort will be put to good use. And I look forward, as the federal member for Robertson, to supporting this community and really getting behind other fundraising efforts, but in particular this fundraising effort because it does such good work through the community. The people that I've mentioned here are a testament to not just the people on the Central Coast, not just in the electorate of Robertson, but right across the country. They are a fantastic group of people and they absolutely must be supported, and also fundraising and charity groups right across the electorate. The McHappy Day fundraising event, Ronald McDonald House does such great work for sick children across the country. Working as an emergency doctor, working in our public health system, particularly when I undertook a paediatric rotation, you can see the tangible results and what Ronald McDonald House does for communities and does for sick children. Mr Deputy Speaker, they really do fantastic work, particularly in the space of assisting families and assisting sick children in the medical oncology space, children who are undergoing treatment for cancer in the community. And with that, Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to thank the team at the Woy McDonald's for McHappy Day, and I'd also like to thank the team at Terrigal Trojans for their fundraising efforts in the last month. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
And I thank the member for Robertson for his forbearance. Is the member for Hunter seeking the call?
Yes.
No pressure.
Are we done?
No, I'm giving the opportunity to. My understanding is the 1:30 finish is soft. We can go a little over.
Thank you. It's very nice of you.
And I give the call to the member for Hunter.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. There is no greater priority for a government of any jurisdiction, state or federal, than health. At least that's what I believe, and that's what the Labor Party at the federal level and the Labor Party in New South Wales believe. But the New South Wales government clearly have other priorities, mostly self-serving, because the public hospitals in Singleton and Muswellbrook are in extremely poor condition, Mr Speaker. Poorly maintained, extremely understaffed, and have been neglected by a government who is out of touch. The quality of the state and its government is defined by its health system. But if the state-run health system in my electorate of the Hunter is anything to go by, the New South Wales state government, put kindly, is incompetent, and put simply, are a failure. Speaker, the New South Wales government have failed my electorate of Hunter, and they have failed the people within it who are at their times of greatest needs. Should be able to rely on their local hospitals to give them the care they need. Standing next to a doctor right here, right now, who has been part of this and understands what the state government has done to doctors in our area. So I take my hat off to you for what you've done in the past. Thank you. The National Party of New South Wales have no right to use the slogan "for the regions" when they have failed on what they should be the most single important priority, which is health. When you fail on providing health care, you fail the people who you claim to represent. We heard all the horror stories of those trying to access basic health care in countries far abroad like America, and we use this as a reminder of how lucky we are and to have such high standards of healthcare in Australia that is accessible for all. Well, that is what is the expectation of those opposite who believe this system in the US is better. But we have no right to boast about our health system here in Australia when people in regional areas are experiencing similar horror stories as to those over in the US. Maybe that's because there are some in the party opposite, both at federal level and at state level, who fundamentally believe that a person's access to health care and the standard of care they receive should depend on the amount in their bank. There are some people with a warped philosophy who actually believe that the more money you earn, the better health care you should be able to access. Well, Speaker, I know one thing. I wouldn't rely on these people to shout you a beer at the pub, and I certainly wouldn't rely on them to run our precious health system in New South Wales. The New South Wales government should hang their head in shame, knowing that because of them, parts of our country that pride itself on its health system are without a reason to be proud. Areas like Singleton and Muswellbrook have no such world-class health care that's accessible to them. Speaker, it just doesn't cut it with me. I'm from the party that's built on the concept of being equal and having equal opportunities, and the people in my electorate just want a fair go. The New South Wales Minister for Health and the state member for Upper Hunter must find some sort of mortality somewhere in their pork barrelling books and look after people who desperately need their hospitals to be properly funded, resourced, staffed and maintained. Regardless of where you live, in your time of greatest need, when you go to your local hospital, they should be equipped to provide the care you need. But unfortunately, this is not the current reality, and for that, the state government and state members should be deeply, deeply ashamed. Speaker, people in Singleton and Muswellbrook are almost better off going to Bunnings and buying their own first aid kits than relying on their local hospitals. And this is by no means a reflection on the staff at these hospitals. They all do incredible work, and I thank every single one of them for the work that they do. They're amazing people working in the public health system in Hunter. But this is a reflection on the state government, whose neglect is at such a level that it actually puts my constituents' health at risk. I was lucky enough, or unfortunate enough, to go and have a look at the Singleton Hospital. I got taken through there by their manager, and it is honestly in disgraceful need for upgrade. Parts of it have been upgraded, but then there's parts of it that you wouldn't even put your dog in, that unfortunately they're putting people in to go and get better. And unfortunately we need better standards than this in the New South Wales government.
The member's time has expired. The question is that the Federation Chamber do now adjourn, and I will put that question, that the motion be agreed to. All of those opinions say aye. Aye. Against say no. I think the ayes have it. The Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 10:30 a.m. on Monday, the 28th of November 2022.
I call the clerk.
Government business. Order of the day. Number 1, Appropriation Bill Number 1, 2022-2023. Further consideration in detail.
The proposed expenditure now before the Federation Chamber is for the finance portfolio, $108,738,000. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to. I call the Minister.
Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Well, the budget at large had a number of objectives. Firstly, to have an open and honest conversation with the Australian people about the state of public finances. We've inherited $1 trillion worth of debt. The interest payments on that debt alone are one of the fastest growing areas of public expenditure. So it behoves us all to ensure that we are doing everything in our power to bring down the deficit and ensure that we aren't adding to the already huge budget deficit and debt deficit. Secondly, ensuring that we set in train the process for implementing our budget, our election commitments. So whether it's childcare, more affordable childcare, whether it's resolving the mess in aged care, whether it's implementing our commitment to an independent commission against corruption and ensuring we have budget line items available for this, in fact, right across all of our portfolio areas, ensuring that we're able to provision for those commitments. In addition to that, ensuring that we could go through the budget line by line and remove wasteful or inefficient spending. And we've done that, indeed, $22 billion worth of wasteful or unproductive spending, either returned to the budget bottom line or redirected to more productive and economic ends. One of the things that we did find, it goes directly to some of the claims that have been made by the Shadow Treasurer, Madam Deputy Speaker, as we went through the line-by-line analysis, that we found enormous black holes within the budget in just about every portfolio agency. Now, whether it was due to negligence, incompetence or dishonesty, the portfolio by portfolio by portfolio, programs that are ongoing programs in any common sense of the word, were unfunded. Funded until Christmas this year, funded, should I say till the end of the calendar year, funded to the end of the financial year, or funded perhaps to the end of the financial year after, but not properly provisioned for. Whether it was in the health portfolio, indeed in my own Treasury portfolio or the finance portfolio, right across the board, absolutely essential items of government expenditure not provisioned for. So 85% of the net spending, due to government decisions in the October budget were due to dealing with those sort of legacy issues. 85% of the net spending were dealing with those legacy issues and other unavoidable spending. Indeed, of the $9.8 billion in net spending, 8.3 of this was due to legacy issues that needed to be resolved or unavoidable spending. What are some examples of that? Well, $4.2 billion in unavoidable spending, including $2.6 billion in COVID-relating spends and nearly $1.4 billion in pharmaceutical benefit scheme listing. So when members opposite get up and criticise those necessary increases in spending, I'd like them to itemise which of those that they want removed from the budget, which drugs, which PBO listing, pharmaceutical benefit scheme listing do they want removed? Which ones do they want removed? Or is it food for aged care centres that they want removed? Is it more spending for aged care workers that they want removed? Is it the increase in pension or the increase in support for persons on unemployment benefits, which are indexed to various inflation and wage cost index related indexes? So the majority of the increase in spending in the budget from this year to last year, or this year from what was published in May this year, is due to these sort of factors. So as the bellicose howls from those opposite start to raise issues about the necessary spending that we've had to inherit, they might like to itemise which of the items across any portfolio, including the finance portfolio, that they would have us remove from the budget. Indeed, which of these items, if they're successful in the next election, they'll remove. I'd like to know which drugs they want delisted. I'd like to know how much money they want to remove from the aged care system and what the impact of that's going to be on food quality and aged care standards in the aged care system. Perhaps it's the infrastructure portfolio they want to remove spending from. I don't know, Deputy Speaker, but they seem to be making a lot of noise with a lot of answers. So, difficult times, but it starts with having the adults in the room, having an honest conversation about the state of the budget.
The question is that the proposed expenditure for the finance portfolio be agreed to. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? Carried. The proposed expenditure now before the Federation Chamber is for the Prime Minister and Cabinet, $439,584,000. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to, and I call the Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a landmark budget for Indigenous Australians. At the election, we said we would renew Australia's commitment to reconciliation and work in genuine partnership with First Nations for better practical outcomes. This budget honours those commitments. We are working to implement the Uluru Statement in full. We will ask all Australians to support the recognition of our First Peoples in our Constitution by enshrining a voice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Constitution. The referendum will be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create practical, lasting change that improves lives and builds a better future for all Australians. Importantly, it will give Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people a say on matters that affect them. We have committed $50.2 million to the AEC to prepare for this referendum. We are also investing $5.8 million to commence work on establishing an independent Makarrata Commission as part of the government's $27.7 million election commitment. Quality of life for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people can and should be better. That's why closing the gap is a top priority for the Albanese government. We are investing more than $300 million to improve access to culturally safe and responsible health services, including in the members' opposites electorate. This responds a fundamental change to the delivery of First Nations health. It will grow the Aboriginal community-controlled health services sector in urban, regional, rural and remote communities of Australia. We will build a dedicated birthing on country centre of excellence at Waminda in Nara in New South Wales. And we will boost the First Nations health workforce by training 500 health workers. This training will be designed and implemented in genuine partnership with First Nations people. Solid foundations are vital. That's why we are investing more than $164.3 million in 17 critical First Nations health infrastructure projects across the country. The projects will provide modern, high-quality health clinics in areas of large and growing First Nations populations. They will also build capacity to target chronic disease treatment and rehabilitation. We know that getting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children into early education will benefit them for the rest of their lives. As part of the government's plan for cheaper childcare, all Indigenous children will be able to access 36 hours of subsidised childcare a fortnight from July 2023. This is a practical measure directed at closing the gap in an area where we are going backwards. It will make a difference to Indigenous children across the country. More than 30 years after the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, rates of incarceration are a national shame. The Albanese Labor government's First Nations Justice Package will see a record $99 million invested in this issue. This includes $81.5 million to establish up to 30 community-led justice reinvestment initiatives across Australia and establish an independent National Justice Reinvestment Unit. This is the largest funding package in justice reinvestment ever committed by the Commonwealth. These are only a few of the measures we are funding to deliver a better future for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians. Of course, Madam Speaker, in other portfolios, like the environment portfolio, we're investing in additional Aboriginal ranges and Aboriginal protected areas as an example. But I'm very proud of this commitment, all based on the notion of self-determination.
Being no further speakers, I'll put the question. The question is that the proposed expenditure for the Prime Minister and Cabinet's portfolio be agreed to. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. Is it the wish of the Federation Chamber to take the remainder bill as a whole? All those in favour? All those against? Carried. The question is that the remainder of the bill be agreed to. Yes. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. This bill has been agreed to. The question is that the bill be reported to the House without amendment. Clerk.
Government business, order of the day number 2, appropriation bill number 2, 2022-2023, resumption of debate on the second reading.
The question is that this bill be now read a second time. If no members wish to consider the bill in detail, I will put the report question immediately. The question is that the bill be reported to the House without amendment. All those in favour? Sorry, I'll put the question.
On the second reading. That the bill be read a second time.
All right. Sorry, I've gone because no one spoke. I did that.
That's a question we've got to do.
Right. Sorry, everybody. We have to go back to the start. I thought I did that. Okay. All right. Sorry. We'll start again. The question is that the bill be now read a second time. If no members wish... Oh, sorry.
Put that question.
Okay.
That the bill be now read a second.
That the bill... I put the question that the bill be now read a second time. All those in favour? All those against? Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to appropriate money out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund for certain expenditure and for related purposes.
Apologies. If no member wishes to consider the bill in detail, I will put the question immediately. The question is that the bill be reported to the House without amendment. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. Clerk.
Government business, order of the day number 3, appropriation parliamentary departments bill number 1, 2022-2023, resumption of debate on the second reading.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. Clerk. I put the question. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. Clerk.
Second reading, a bill for an act to appropriate money out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund for expenditure in relation to the parliamentary departments and for related purposes.
If no member wishes to speak to the bill in consideration, I will put the question immediately. The question is that the bill be reported to the House without amendment. All those in favour? All those against? Carried. I call the Minister.
I move that the Federation Chamber now adjourn.
The member...
Madam Deputy Speaker, but I don't actually think I have to come from the Minister.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. All those in favour, all those against? Declare it carried. The Federation Chamber stands adjourned until 10:30 a.m. on Monday, the 28th of November.